And so with that, welcome to the first Got a World to See podcast episode. I am super excited. We're gonna jump into it right away. And in today's video, it's gonna be very personal. I'm gonna share my story, let's say where I'm from, how my childhood was, but all, let's say, under the emphasis of creating a certain lifestyle of travel. So this episode will be on one side very practical for everybody who maybe wants to travel, start a YouTube channel. I will share a lot of details about that. On the other side, I will share my mission, why I want to start this podcast. I talk about building freedom in the three aspects of health, relationships, and finance, personal branding. Let's hop into it. That's a secret.
So I just somehow love doing that.
Welcome back to the Got a World to See podcast. Okay, this is officially the first Got a World to See podcast episode, and it's gonna be exciting. So with this episode, I really want to share who I am, what I do, what I believe in, and if sometimes people ask me questions, I want to refer them to this video, and it's also going to be the base for the podcast. It's going to be the first podcast. People might go back to it, hopefully in the future, maybe to listen to it, maybe see what changed. And in today's video, I want to share a little bit my story, as in my childhood story, first beginnings, and kind of how I got to where I am of living a perpetual traveling lifestyle, living in different countries, and I'm really just starting out, and I want to take you along on this journey on how I was able to do the few things that I've been doing, and where I want to go forward, and how I want to take you along on that as well. So without further ado, I would say let's kick off the podcast. I want to make it casual. I want to make it fun. I want to make it as if we're having a conversation. And sometimes when I'm having conversation, I tend to also talk a little bit too much. Maybe I'm talking too much to a camera, but I really want to make you feel like you're with me. And today I want to talk about a little bit my childhood, my upbringing, where I was born, my time in the US, how I started to make videos, how I started to make money with that, how I decided to just not live anywhere anymore, kind of like live everywhere. And then also the goal of this podcast, which I summarize kind of like building freedom, emotional freedom, and freedom in the aspects of finance, health, and relationships. So kind of the topics that I read into, how I got into personal development, some of the biggest ideas there. And right now you maybe hear my voice is a little bit different. I'm not trying to necessarily make a deep voice. It's because I am a little bit sick. I didn't record the podcast yesterday, and I wanted to do this project for months. So in the next few days, there will be the first pre-recorded episodes coming up, one with Komang Arnawa. He's a pro-natural bodybuilder. We had a really cool conversation about his upbringing, how he was like eating, how he didn't have money to pay for eggs to prepare for his competition. He didn't have enough food coming from Bali. Super interesting story, how he was dealing with his setbacks. And another story with another good friend. We're talking about meditation, insecurities, girls. And we're gonna jump into my story. First of all, I also started a Patreon. On the one side, you support generally my work, the channel, then you got a world to see, my travel videos, but also specifically this project. Going forward, but possibly want to host events. And with that, I want to be a little bit more independent from the ad revenue here on YouTube. So you can check it out in the description below. In a previous video, I mentioned exactly how I want to do it. Also on there, I describe exactly what you get back, how you can connect with me in person by joining the Got a World to See tribe. And to start off my story, people always ask like, hey, where are you from? And I struggle a little bit to answer this question because my background is I was born in Ukraine, to be specific in Zaporozhye. It's an industrial medium-sized city in Ukraine, and both of my parents are Ukrainian. And I lived there until I was 5, 6. And then my family immigrated to Germany together with my older brother, who is 4 years older. Shout out to you, Giannis, much love. He's actually expecting his first kid right now. Super pumped for him. Fatherhood, that's a whole nother level. And we moved to Germany, and I went already to the first grade in Ukraine. That's where I learned Russian. It's kind of like my native tongue, even though I speak it pretty fluently. But when it comes to like having conversations like this, I actually struggle a little bit. And then in Germany, this is where I grew up for the most part. I think now I'm actually at a point where half of my life I lived in Germany, half of my life I did not, because for the past 6-7 years, kind of like with a high school exchange that I did, we're going to talk about it in a second as well. I lived like less time actually in Germany than in other places. So now it's actually starting to be more time outside. So where am I from? I mean, by nationality, I became a German quite a while ago. And I have so much appreciation for the opportunity that kind of like my parents gave me, and also Germany in many ways gave me, by growing up with having another perspective on life, seeing different opportunities, and to kind of like get into the 6-7 year old Dany arriving in Germany. It was a crazy time. Like I remember just like some good little childhood memories from being like 4 or 5 years old. Actually, my memories, my brother tells it to me all the time. It's like, you remember the weirdest things. And it's like, just like I remember like throwing kind of like a shoe cleaner in his face, and then he spit on my face. Like, just childhood stories that I like perfectly can recount. For some reason, memory is working quite well in terms of that. And but there I only have like childhood stories. Then we moved to Germany and going to the first grade, so I kind of like restarted. I didn't went to the second grade. But I was like a 7.5-year-old kid, so it made sense. I went to the first grade in Germany, and there I didn't spoke a single word of the local language. And it was kind of crazy. Like the teacher was like yelling in a classroom. So for me, it was quite a shock, and it was very weird because I kind of knew a life back home, like the Ukrainian life. And then I got a little bit ripped out of that, but because I was still pretty young, to me, it just seemed like one whole big adventure. And I really embraced it, and I learned the language super quick. And actually, in the first few grades, because the Russian school system was a little bit, Ukrainian, was a little bit more rougher, if you will. I was pretty good at math and things like that. So actually, I really enjoyed my first few years in primary school. And then later on, I got a little bit more rebellious. I just was always a little bit the rebellious kid. Got into fights in like 3rd, 4th grade, and like my teachers were telling me, "Oh, you need to discipline yourself." And then actually, when growing up, I had a good role model in my brother, and this is kind of like where I want to dive into the topic. On the one side, role models. On the other side, certain privileges that people have in terms of how did they grow up. Do you grow up with money? Do you grow up with good parents? Do you grow up in a good neighborhood? How does it affect you? And how I would say having the right mindset and parenting can really have a big effect. This is kind of like what I see. And what exactly I mean is that, first of all, my brother started to have like his first jobs when he was like, I think 13, 12, kind of like that. He got into handing out newspapers, and I joined him and I started to help him with that. Obviously, I was like 4.5 years younger. So what was it, like 9 years old, and I made my first own money. And I got to say, I freaking love that. So I remember before it was like, I'm going to start this newspaper job in a month or two, he was telling me, and maybe I can join him and I can get like a cut off of it. It was like 20 euro. He got 40, I got 20, I remember. And I was like, wow, then I could buy my own stuff. And at a young age, it gave me a little bit of this, like, you put in work, and for your work, you get compensated, basically. And you kind of like can be I don't want to call it self-sustaining or self-reliable as a 9-year-old, but it was quite the amazing experience. I remember having a little bit of a bucket where I put this money in, and I kept it there, and I didn't want to spend much of it. So that's kind of like what I contribute my personal finance. I don't know how you want to call it, not skills, but just I like to track my expenses, and I'm being pretty strict on it. Wow, this is not the first pause in my podcast. I'm like, I don't know what to say. I'm trying to drink on a hot tea to keep the voice nice and fresh. But basically what I'm saying is, to this point, I really remember where I started to kind of like track my finances as a 10-year-old. And then later on, I started to do the newspapers myself. My brother got a little bit of a different job. So I had this great example in him that I will be forever grateful for, of just kind of like making your own thing from a young age. And the thing was, our parents immigrated to Germany basically having nothing. My father was in the army, and was an electrical engineer, qualified in that. My mother, I believe, was working in like a marketing company back then. And they arrived in Germany. Basically, the qualifications didn't really count. And obviously, they had a hard time not speaking the language, and on and off, different jobs. So growing up I never considered myself as being poor, and I never felt that. But what I did feel is that resources are limited, and kind of like growing up like that, I even felt like to some way it's normal. So I see some kids are different, their parents are showering them with presents or whatever. But I kind of like I did feel a little bit that I didn't want it to be a burden. And this is kind of like one of the most classic like childhood traumas that people can have, is like, you just don't want to be a burden on anybody. But actually, for the most part, I see it as a huge benefit and upside in my upbringing. And what I exactly mean by that is, I remember I was on the bus with my mom, and she asked me if she wants to give me pocket money, if she should give me pocket money, because all the kids in school, they were starting to get pocket money from their parents. And I kind of like, I really wanted it to be. I was like, wow, €5 a week or whatever she suggested, €4, wow. And to me, that was like, I don't know, like 100. These days, like 1,000 a month or something, like, wow, that would be so great. But then it was like before I started to hand out newspapers with my brother. I knew, hey, you know what, Mom? I'm actually going to make money with my brother, and we're good. I don't even think she remembers this conversation. It was on the bus. I even remember the station in the city that I grew up in Germany, in Bonn, Germany. At the station, it was in Bad Godesberg, for all maybe the local peeps listening. And like, I don't want to make myself into like a great story. Like there's a reason why I'm saying this. I don't think there's anything too special. I think it's kind of like a classical immigrant upbringing story. And in that moment, I just didn't want it to put any further burden as like a young kid, which almost might be like negative in some way. Like, wow, like this kid has like this certain understanding or whatever, feels like that. But I felt so good and so amazing about making my first money. Then later on, I started like little businesses. My grandpa had a lot of aquarium fishes, and then I had an aquarium. I had 2 aquariums. I had these fishes, small fishes called guppies, and they make babies like like crazy. And I was like, well, what should I do with them? And I knew some people like sell their like fish on like kind of like a Craigslist equivalent, like eBay, Craigslist in Germany. And I put them on there on all the different platforms, and then I started to get calls. I started to make 20, 30, 50, sometimes like 80 or even 100 in like fishes that I was selling in the best month in the high season. It was like 100. And then I even like a year or two later, when I was like 13, 14, I started to expand my business, and I was shipping the fishes even like overnight. And maybe made like 150 in like the best month. So nothing crazy, but to me, I felt really, really good. And with that, also a little bit of my rebelliousness that I feel in different ways about it. Basically, my rebelliousness in school, I wasn't really excited. I had a hard time concentrating in school. And even though I was a really good student up until like grade 5, 6, that's where it really started to go downhill. I didn't feel like studying, started to get like interested in girls. And I remembered then also making these amounts like of money as a young kid. And then my dad was telling me like, yo, you have to get your shit together. You have to like get better in schools, get your grades up. And I was like, yeah. And he's like, do you think I'm not serious? It's like, do you think just because you make like money here with your fishes, do you think that's what you're going to do all your life? You're going to have like a fish empire and that's what you're going to do? And I was just like, well, whatever, we'll see, And yeah, so my studies, we kept on going. We're always okay up until like grade 9. I'm not sure what was happening there. It was for me really a turning point where I had a friend group, and I wish these guys really the best. And some of them I'm still keep a little bit in touch. They're living their life. And like I one of the things that I kind of like really was working on is to not keep any grudges, to just be focused on building your own life and try to not have resentment. If there is resentment situations, try to resolve them. And what I mean by that is, basically I had a friends circle group. Everybody was a little bit kind of like picking on each other. Like I was the acne brother from, you're not going to get too deep into that. I had pretty bad acne problems. Oh, and that definitely took a big toll on my confidence. Felt really insecure about that. And luckily, my skin healed up quite well. People don't even notice and cannot even believe it. I had a video before on my second channel where I pulled up a few photos, and then the other guys, he was with his haircut, the other guy was like, didn't have a ticket to take the buses, and we were bullying each other all the time, and I really didn't like that. And so that was kind of like the moment where I started to break out a little bit, look for new friend circles, and that was a moment for me where I was like, hey, I can find like new friends. It was an interesting moment where I was like, I'm just not gonna take this type of treatment. I don't feel like I deserve to be in an unsupportive friend circle where everybody's challenging each other all the time and bullies each other, and you obviously see that nobody really enjoys it. So I actually went over and found some new friends. One of them was Tommy. If you're listening to this, bro, shout out to you. We were just on a call. It's also like recently it became a little bit more important for me to keep up older friendships, because I was listening to a podcast and I really liked this idea. This guy was saying, I think it was Dean Graciosi, he was like, hey, one of the things that money cannot buy and you cannot get, like you can always meet new people, you can always make more money, but you cannot get old friends. So I'm not saying just keep up old relationships. I'm actually more of a bigger guy, meet new people, meet like-minded individuals, but something you cannot get back is this beautiful feeling of having an old, deep friendship. And one of them, I would say, my bro Tommy. We have been really big bros for a long time. But before I'm gonna get into that stage where we start to go out, I started to get a little bit into dating advice, started to see girls pick up. It was an interesting time. I want to share this big idea in my let's say childhood, that I did feel a little bit of a lack, like a financial lack. My parents not being able to, or however, not getting like the newest toys or whatever, even though I would say my mother really tried to protect us and not make us feel like that, it was always a little bit in the air, and I understood that I maybe not like maybe some of my German friends, that where the families are better well off. Basically, it forced me in a very natural way to become self-reliant at a young age, to make my own money, and to figure things out by myself. And I would say this is one of the biggest gifts, and let's say a blessing in disguise, because sometimes I did feel negative about it. I did felt a little bit like the victim of my circumstances, and I don't want to discount anybody who is maybe in an unfortunate situation where their parents are not doing well, they're living maybe in a bad neighborhood, they have bad opportunities, but it's always very, very relative. But comparing, like, let's say to the situation that I was in, most of the people that I was surrounding me were in a better situation. But I decided just for myself, and I had the great role model in my brother, that I wanna take accountability and responsibility for my life at an early age. And I wasn't there like 11 years old, I'm taking responsibility. But it was really a natural development where I transitioned into building myself up by myself, figuring things out myself. I put out all this stuff online, the fishes, then I was selling games later on online that I was like importing from England and America, and I was selling them in Germany to even like my friends. I was like the gaming dealer, just small things like that. I figured all of that stuff by myself, and it was kind of like it came out of necessity. It wasn't like I had an example of like an entrepreneurial older brother or father or grandpa or whatever. It just kind of happened out of necessity. And I would say that was the biggest blessing in disguise, that it allowed me to get on this path of like figuring things out by yourself. And later on, when I was like 17, 18, 19, and my friends, my peers started into getting their first jobs, and they were really, really overwhelmed by figuring these things out, writing applications and trying to make their own money, trying to maybe travel by themselves. It was like a very, very new concept to them. And I luckily got pushed into having to figure out all of that stuff like 5-6 years earlier on. And I will be forever grateful for that. So big thank you to my mom. I love you very much. And she really, for me, she made me feel like I can do and I can be whatever I want if I'm willing to put in the work. I remember this one time I had like my first little breakup when I was like 17, 18. And I was like, I had this great relationship with my mom that I could talk to her about it. And she really gave me a lot of support. But at some point she told me, I cannot help you. You have to deal with that by yourself. With this pain, with this situation. I'll be there for you. I'll listen to you. But at some point you have to stop crying, and you have to, like literally and metaphorically, you have to get your stuff together and become a man, almost. As she never said that literally, but that's really what I felt. And those were a big moment for me. It's kind of like what Jordan Peterson talks about. If your loved one and close ones are in pain or in trouble, when should you help them? of course you want to help. Of course you don't want to see the people around you suffer, but at some point, and he was also telling that like very often parents make for better parents if they're slightly neglective out of necessity. If they're young parents and they have to just figure things out for themselves, then the children also have to figure their stuff out by themselves, like Jordan Peterson talks about that. And that's kind of like what naturally happened for me. And he's also telling me that sometimes by helping people with everything, you steal from them the opportunity to figure things out by themselves, to be there with their pain, with their drama, their misery, and sure, give them a certain level of support, but also leave a certain gap where children or even people at all point in their lives can grow by themselves, can develop these like coping muscles. And that was very, very big for me. So again, big thank you to my mom and my dad definitely as well. Maybe that's for another podcast. I don't want to also get like too personal and too dramatic. And me sharing the story is really for you to hopefully to relate in some way, to on the one side get to know me a little bit better, but really the main emphasis is not like telling like a great story. I'm just in the beginning of my journey, just as most of us. I want to just share and I want to give like my younger self a certain kickstart, a certain insight, and So to jump back into, let's say, my upbringing when I was like 15, 16, as I said, had a little bit of a messed up friend circle, love these guys. I'm sure some of them are great, keeping up with some of them. Everybody's on their path, no personal judgment. But so I met my bro Tamo. We got a little bit into dating advice online. If you're like a 15, 16-year-old guy, that's just what you're interested in. You're like, how'd you get the girl? You put it on Google. And back then, the, let's say, dating niche was emerging a little bit, like with movies like Hitch, The Date Doctor, RSD back in the day, Owen Cook. That was cool content. We really liked it, and we started to go out and just approach people. Girls, guys, partying, trying to get a good vibe. Me and Tamo, we were going to Klangfabrik a lot, and that's again like a little bit of insiders of people watching from Bonn. And we had a great time. And also after like a few months, like I remember the first few weeks, months, we just tried to approach somebody. We were like super awkward. But actually after a year or two, we built this like skill of being able to just make friends like that. Like just go out and meet people and create new relationships. And that was crazy. Actually, that's how I met many of the people. That's how I met my then girlfriend, just basically by saying hi at some point. And that's crazy what type of things can happen. If you're sometimes, I don't know, you're in the gym, you see somebody who's cool, be it a girl or a guy, a buddy, a business partner, an intimate partner, a mentor, a mentee, anything can come out of it. And it's really crazy. And I'm not saying that I'm always like in the mode where I always meet people. Personally, I am actually a little bit more introverted. And especially if I sit at home a lot, I work a lot, I have a hard time to go out and socialize, but I learned that socializing is a skill, and you can get into a certain momentum and a certain groove where you just let go and things just happen naturally. And some of the greatest relationships of my life have been developed out of nothing, and I'm forever grateful for coming across this knowledge from my buddy Tamo for the most part, going out together. And after that, but with that, also, I have to say, my school declined a little bit. I felt really good about myself, and I became, I have to honestly say it, a little bit arrogant. While some people might perceive me as such, still, I mean, we all have our problems. And I actually, like, sometimes I wish I would be a little bit more humble, in a way of like appearing more humble. Just, I don't know, like I struggled as a younger guy that people told, like, what do you think? Do you think you're better than us? And actually, I feel better in terms of like my personal conduct. If I know I have my shit together, I'm waking up early, I'm doing the stuff that I believe is right, I'm taking care of myself, I'm taking care of the people that I love, and that if I see somebody who doesn't do that, I feel better in a way of like, I want to help you out, I want to pull you up with me, or I'm like, hey, we're just living different lives. On a basic human to human level, that's like also kind of like the stuff that I'm studying, you know, reading the books, listening to the podcasts. It's, I definitely believe like we're all in the same boat. We're all experiencing this human experience where consciousness in a human body is an interesting concept. And so with that, to bring it back to the topic, like in my 16, 17 year old self, 15, 16, 17 year old self, I became a little bit full of myself. Like I was meeting people, I was making some money, and I was just like a little bit like a loud mouth. And like many people didn't like me for that, especially just people looking from the outside in. And definitely things that I would have done looking back differently. And also with that, my studies went down. I was a little bit of an arrogant guy, coming back to lessons late, coming in late for like school lessons, just like walking in, I'm late, I'm sorry. Like not respecting some of my teachers. I have to honestly say, like if any of my teachers by any chance listen and think that I was a little sack, I'm sorry. I'm sorry if I was a pain. But also, actually, I had some amazing relationships with some of my teachers. I was really the type of guy, like either teachers liked me, I had a good relationship, or thought I'm like full of myself. And in some way, I apologize for that. Should have definitely showed more respect and empathy. And I felt like some teachers are after me, and some teachers they're just like evil. And like being a teacher is like one of the hardest jobs, I would say. So big respect for that. And so my studies really went down. I almost failed the 9th grade. And after 9th grade, I was planning to go to the US. It was a big dream. My brother did it before me. So again, big role model in that. And I was collecting a lot of money. So by the age I was like 16, I was able to put aside around like 4,000 euro. And I applied for the program of the high school exchange. They accepted me. But my studies didn't look well. I had a bunch of 4 minuses, 1 or 2 Fs, like in physics, chemistry, just stuff that I just didn't keep up on, while still having some good grades in like, I don't know, whatever. And as we all know, it always like really depended on the teacher. Like I remember I was extremely good in German, like actually analyzing text with one of my teachers. I really loved this teacher. She was really cool, younger lady, early 30s. And then I had another teacher, no offense against her, actually, in the end, we also had a pretty decent relationship, but then all of a sudden I had a D-, things like that, And I almost failed the 9th grade, after making excuses for the bad grades. Basically, I was just too busy doing other stuff. A rebellious little sack of blah. And I almost failed it. I had to go into like, at the end of the time to like redo the exams with my biology teacher, because I also had a D- in biology, which then went up to like a B+ or something like that. And the next year with a different teacher. And he was actually a great guy. He was a tough guy. He was tough on me. He was like, if you're going to learn, if you're going to deliver, I'm going to fairly judge you. And at the end, I got like a B- or something like that, or a C+ in that like re-exam at the end of the year to raise up this grade. So I got into 10th grade. 10th grade was just fine. My grades got a lot better. And after that, I went to the United States for a high school exchange year for 1 year. So actually right now, my personal story, I would say, is almost getting a little bit too long. We're almost at like half an hour. But basically, it was a really good time. I got a scholarship from kind of like the German state to go there. So I got some financial support in that. That was really good for me. So my parents, I believe they paid the flight and a little bit of the program. And it also was a good feeling really to kind of like pay a large amount of this thing for myself. It was like the first big thing that I bought for myself. And being in the US, I ended up in Ohio in a small town with, I was staying with a teacher, with Doug. Also, kind of like today's video is just thanking people. It was a great time. He was a very giving guy, very good guy, very knowledgeable guy. He was teaching government in in the high school that I was going to. And his government class was one of the favorite things that I was doing. Actually learned about the US government a good bit, which is kind of like still my main interest when it comes to politics, like US politics, I think. Very interesting, and towards the end of the year, there will also be a big topic this year, I'm pretty sure. Just coming over a little bit closer here and to make ourselves comfortable. But what did I learn in this big high school exchange year? I gotta say, this was one of the biggest lessons of my life. Like, this podcast is so epic. It changed my life. Of course it did, big events like that, high school exchange. What I realized is this crazy phenomenon of we're living in this bubble where we believe that our reality is the reality, that our friends are the friends that we have, and it's very important to not mess up with the relationship, to not say the wrong things, to not have a bad like impression of our people. We're super caught up in the opinions, especially when we're teenagers. Like I would say like high school is like hell for many teenagers, in some way me included as well. You just feel so much pressure. But what I realized there, I arrived in a completely new world in the United States, in Ohio, kind of a little bit like old school and like old school lifestyle. The school was actually quite new. I even have a video when I came back to doesn't matter. There I created a new friend circle. I was living there for 1 year in a different country, in a different culture, in a different environment, family setting. Everything was different. At some point, it almost seemed like my previous life is kind of like a huge, long dream. And my new life is the new thing. It's almost like my previous life was the Matrix and this is the real world. Or right now, I got plugged into the Matrix in some way. Like the perception of reality becomes really weird and really fuzzy. And with that, there's a very freeing feeling. This feeling of like a lot of people want to, let's say, leave their city and pursue a bigger vision, a bigger goal. But you're just afraid, well, what are the people back at home in your village are going to think? Or in your big city? Like, I don't want to sound condescending or anything. And I don't think there's anything wrong with staying in your village and living a different lifestyle. But if you have this like authentic drive from within of wanting to go out into the world and pursue something bigger, you're very scared. Like, what if I'm not going to find anyone? What if I'm going to end up alone? And this kind of like comes from our innate tribal fear. Like our brains evolved when we were living in smaller tribes. So naturally, we are very scared of, let's say, exiting the tribe, being excluded from it. And there's almost like survival fears that we're having. So to bring it back into more practical, doing this exchange year allowed me to realize that as much as I value my friends back home, I just got here and I live a completely new life here. And it's almost like I could give up on the old life after spending like 4 or 5 months here and I'm all set. Well, that means I can do that again somewhere else and then somewhere else. And then I don't need to be, let's say, jailed in some way into the environment in which I potentially don't feel self-actualized. And what I mean is, if you feel amazing in your environment, damn, you won. You're doing amazing. But if you feel like you want to live a different lifestyle, you want to maybe have a few new people in your life that are having similar interests than you. Maybe you have a lot of buddies that are great friends of yours. You love to go out for a beer with them, watching maybe a sports match. But then if you want to talk about a little bit deeper topics about psychology, philosophy, goals, ambitions, businesses that you maybe want to start, you just don't have anyone. And you feel really alone in that sense. Trust me, make this experience of going out there. Like if you're a little bit older now, or if you're a young guy or girl and you're listening to this, maybe consider doing a high school exchange. Like for me, that was also one of the biggest gifts again from my parents. Like many families who did like much, much better than we did, they told their kids, well, we cannot afford this, it's a lot of money. But actually they just didn't feel comfortable with it, letting go their child like that. But my parents gave me that freedom. And also they were like, you can do this and we will help you. We will do our best. And that was just basically crazy. We found ways, the scholarship, went to the US, had this big eye-opening, really obviously also made me into a lot more of an, let's say, adult, or helped me really to mature in a way of, I had to create a new life in a new place being a 7-year-old boy. Yeah, you just go out there, you create a life for yourself. So, coming back to Germany, finishing up high school, nothing too special, was a little bit involved in like, nothing too crazy. Got back, we're seeing some people. I'm just trying to think if anything, And then I decided I got a world to see. Let's get into the world to see. Let's get into how I built the YouTube channel, what I was doing. So basically coming back from the United States, this is also, let's say, where the slight American nuance, or maybe this just like dirty English is coming from that I'm having. But at some point I decided I really want to see the world. This little experience, this little glimpse that I had from building a new life, from going to the US, I wanted to take it to a whole new level. I remember writing goals when I was in the US that I want to do a Euro trip, and at some point I want to do a world trip. And I kind of did a Euro trip with my buddies back in the day, Tommy and Nick. was an interesting experience. Me and Tommy almost got into a fight 2 weeks or like 10 days into it, you know, living with people. Yeah, but it was all good. That's like really brotherhood. Like you fight and then like an hour later, it's like, I love you, bro. And so things really started to manifest themselves. I really wrote down the things that I want to do. I started, as I said, to work after school, part-time, then full-time, finished up my school, kind of like a decent average, kind of like a B minus overall Abitur. It's kind of like the high school diploma that you get. And I was not that good in the 11th grade, and the 12th grade I really picked it up. And it was actually funny to see how I was already drinking when I was like 15, 16, a good amount. Then I stopped completely when I was 17, 18. That's when I got on the 5 a.m. train. And then my peers actually, they started to get into drinking, dating, and their grades started to really fall. I was at a point where I was like, yo, screw all of that stuff. I want to get my grades up now. So I went like from a C minus level to like a B minus level with my graduation. So I was personally happy with that. I'm pretty sure I could have done better, but yeah, we all could have done better, of course, you know. And during that time, I set up the vision, hey, I want to travel the world after school. And at that point, I also met my then girlfriend. She was a big part of my life, also forever grateful, no regrets at all. For over a year now, we're not together anymore. That's just how life is. That's, yeah. And I don't want to go like, please, no questions to dad. It was a long time ago. She's living her life. She's doing great. Please respect the privacy in terms of that. And so then for a year, we kind of like more or less traveled a little bit together. We decided that we want to do this world trip together. She has been working like crazy. I've been working like crazy, putting aside all the money, no unnecessary spendings, no fancy clothes, nothing. And that was throughout my life. I also always kind of like figured out ways to have the things that I want to have without spending a lot of money. So I was getting my electronics used. I was like also getting like brands sometimes, and I was getting the brands either like with a good deal or sometimes maybe even used, and then I was reselling the things. So I never kind of like spend a lot of money, kind of like buying a new car and then losing all the money on like a lower level. I got new equipment all the time. Like in the past 5 years, I'm upgrading all the time. But actually the first time I bought a new camera was in the past year, like kind of like as a business investment. And all of the other times I was getting used things and then reselling them and still looking pretty sharp, or at least that's how I felt. I just feel like pretty good about the things that I have, the way that I dress, and still now, very minimalist approach to that. So that's where I also developed ways to still have the things that I want to have, but not spend a lot of money, or preferably none at all. So making a good amount of money for that time, and saving almost all of it for a year. And people ask me like, hey, how to start the digital nomad lifestyle or just travel the world? It's like, hey, if you're a young guy or a young girl and you're living at home, get a job, work your butt off, and save all of that money. Everybody else is going out, fancy partying, fancy drinks, fancy Instagram photos, fancy Instagram stories. They get a lot of approval from their friends. But one thing that I recently heard in a podcast and I really love, we value approval from other people so much. But what can we get from that? What can this approval buy us? What can we do with this approval? Can you go to a store and pay with this approval? Like, here, I got a lot of approval from my friends from being on that cool party. They're going to be like, get out of here. So you need to find a way to do you. You need to find a way to make some money. And that's also where I started to do YouTube. And the beginnings of YouTube, they were so hard. Like, it was so hard to kind of like break this insecurity of presenting yourself in front of the camera. I didn't like how I was talking. You can go all the way back, like 4 or 5 years ago, the first few videos, while I think they're not horrible, it's just all part of the journey. And the biggest struggle in the beginning was to make a good amount of videos. So basically, it looked in the way that I was maybe doing like 1 or 2 videos a month, which is just not enough to grow a YouTube channel at all. So it took me like half a year to get to like 500 subscribers, around like more than a year to get to 1,000. And then actually it was quite a funny moment. I remember I was in Ukraine going from a world trip, and that was kind of like the first stop. And the moment I was leaving Ukraine, which was more of a family vacation, then going on the world trip in 2017, that was the moment where I got 1,000 subscribers the day I left to go into Poland, from Poland into Sweden, from Sweden into the US, from the US into England, from England into Singapore. So that was kind of like the first big trip that also really opened my eyes and created a certain global first understanding of how the world works, whatever that means. We can talk about it in a different video, a different podcast. And so the first 1,000 subscribers, then being in the US for the first time back in the US, visited my host family, Doug. That was really good, really great. Visited my old high school, really nostalgic feelings. And with also 1,000 subscribers, that's where I started my channel to be monetized. I started to make the first, whatever it was, like $50, then $100 a month. And it felt really good after like a year or two to finally start to see some money coming in and see some small fruits, some green unripe fruits of your labor. And then a huge scenery change, entering Singapore, Southeast Asia, the first few destinations, kind of like the very well-traveled paths of Thailand, and even though now I see it as like very, very developed, and I wouldn't recommend, like, let's say somebody who wants to go for an adventure to necessarily go to like the most popular Thailand places. It's just not my style anymore. It's like this moment when people travel a lot and then they become these like cool, sophisticated travelers that don't go to the touristic places anymore. So don't get me wrong. I don't want to look down on that. I think it really depends on what what part of the travel journey you are at. In the beginning, it's super, super cool, and you just feel more comfortable, more safe to be in the more touristic areas. And later on, the real adventures where you really feel alive, where you really get challenged, you really get forced to toughen up, you miss buses, you have to figure things out, you have to talk with your hands and your feet, and sometimes people want to take advantage of you. You have to toughen up, you have to assert yourself, and kind of like the school of life, through traveling. But yeah, in the beginning, let's take it slow. Thailand, loved Singapore a lot. And then we were in Australia for 3 months. Actually, recently watched like a few people in Australia, really missing it, 2018, early 2018. And that was also when I made the first 10,000 subscribers. No. I was like at 6,000 subscribers in early 2018. I remember that. And I made the video where it was kind of like my commitment, my story. I told the story of like saving up money, working, and it was supposed to be kind of like a little bit of a motivational video. If you want to travel the world, if you want to make it happen. Back then, like now it's more common in the Western world. A lot of people do that, and I love to see this development. But back then it was a little bit of a weird idea. People were like 2-3 years ago, they were like, what? Like, how are you going to do that? How are you going to have the money? Isn't that like super expensive? And actually the whole year of traveling, I spent less than 10,000 euro. Yep, that's it. And then I also started to make money on like month 4 or 5. So at the end of the day, I came out kind of like with the same money that I had, just as a little context. So yeah, I left already having started to do a lot of videos, or like a good amount. And then I really committed, and the full commitment was, as I mentioned, in January 2018. So I was like, hey, I'm already working hard, but I know I'm holding back. I know I'm still being insecure about putting myself fully out there, and I don't want to hold back anymore. I don't want to go from like 2, 3, 4 videos a week. I want to go to like 8 videos, 2 videos a week minimum, maybe even more, maybe daily vlogging at some point. My goal is to get to 50,000 subscribers by the end of 2018. And that was the video, my story. You can check it out. Told a little bit my story, kind of like similar as in today's video, not as in depth. And I was pumped. I was like, I'm committing, I'm publicly committing. I'm gonna have 50,000 subscribers on this channel. I'm gonna work my butt off. Doesn't matter what it takes. I'm gonna do a lot. And to me, that was kind of like really the breaking point, where then in February, in March, I was in Singapore, in the Philippines, in Thailand, in Malaysia, in Hong Kong, in China. And it sounds like a lot, and it sounds like, oh, look at me, I traveled so much. But actually, it was like the cheapest route to take a little bit, because every flight from one destination to another was like, okay, it cost like 80 euro to get to the Philippines. From the Philippines to Hong Kong, it costs only 60 euro. From Hong Kong to Singapore, it costs another 70 euro. And instead of taking these like $200-$300 flights, euro, whatever, I'm always struggle with like going from one currency to another. I was always taking kind of like the cheapest flights and doing things that make sense in terms of traveling on a budget. So that's like a big hack. Like some people spend like $1,500, $2,000 to go from like, let's say, Europe to Southeast Asia, or from the US to Southeast Asia, or from Australia to Europe, kind of like these dimensions, like across the world. And they spend the same money on the flights. Again, not to bashing them. I don't want to make people feel bad. They're like, oh, I did that. But like, I realized that people spend like 1,000, 1,500 on just the return flights. And I understand that many people don't have the same lifestyle. But then, hey, if you actually take a gap year, you, for barely more money, maybe like a little bit more money, you can travel for half a year instead of traveling for 2 months. Because like in Europe, you can go from London to Barcelona for 20 euro, from Germany, Düsseldorf to London, from London to Stockholm, from Stockholm to there, for like 10, 20 euro if you book the flights a little bit in advance with the budget airlines. So that can be extremely affordable. And in terms of videos, I was busting my ass. I was pumped. I was determined. And also, the views started to go up. Actually, my first spike of views ever, I got like 10,000 views a day after like hitting like 100 or 300 views, somewhere in that range for like a year. I got like 10,000 views in a day because one of my videos took off, a video that I published like a year ago. And that's also how YouTube works. Like in the beginning, you publish a lot of videos, you want to optimize the titles, the tags, you want to research the video topics. That's what I do when I work with people one-on-one. I teach them all the structure and then also the mindset behind it and talk about what that means. And so this video took off, and I remember like in October of 2017, like before I was in Australia, standing on this roof, and I was like, this can happen. And I was like, this is possible, you know, to actually build something like that. Because when you do your first 20, 30, 50 videos and nothing is happening, you like really feel like giving up at some point. So that was the point where I really believed that I can build a little bit of an audience. And then in early 2018, I committed, and then February, March, April, I did daily vlogging. I put like 100 videos in 4 months out. Like it was like daily vlogging for almost 2 months, daily vlogging in the Philippines. My Filipino audience, a lot of love. The Filipinos, they love to watch, like, let's say, travel content, like Westerners traveling in the Philippines. And yeah, so also made a good bunch of Filipino friends during that time. And even then later came back. So that was the big trip. At the end of this trip, I believe I had like 35,000 subscribers. Then I came back to Germany, lived at home for a few months, then got my own crib in Hamburg, was living in Hamburg for 1 year. And I don't want to dive too deep into that. Basically, I did achieve the 50,000 subscribers, I think a little bit earlier than by the end of the year. I think it was like September or October. And so I made that happen. And yeah, then living in Hamburg. I love the city. It's a really cool city, but it's obviously, I built, like, my goal, my mission was to try to build this independent lifestyle. I wanted to make the world my oyster, so to say, and educate myself while traveling the world. So firsthand learning about cultures, but while traveling, listening to podcasts, reading books, and kind of like join the school of life. This was like really my mission. And then I valued, let's say, the relationship that I had back in the day. I just saw like, hey, let's make it happen in Germany, then maybe travel a little bit here and there. And I was doing a little bit of productivity content, 5 a.m. content. That never really took off. Some videos did really well, like cold showering video I did. And I really love this content and I still keep doing it. But that was also the point where I decided that I want to, like, here on Dany of the World to See, I still want to keep sharing like my story, traveling. So the biggest value is kind of like in travel content, people who want to travel, people who are interested in my travel movies. But also sharing a little bit the self-development side, but that I, at this point, kind of like expanded on a second channel that is doing fairly well. It gets like a few hundred views, but there I also want to lighten it up a little bit. There I really talk like really deep and complicated sometimes because I listen all day to like people like Jordan Peterson and read into like Carl Jung, Nietzsche, the shadow, stoicism, like things like that made my videos a little bit dense. So I actually want to bring it down a little bit, lighten it up a little bit. So that's another project that I'm doing that is growing, that I'm putting in more energy, and also with the support on Patreon now with the podcast. I think there will be more energy into that. And yeah, so then I just decided like, hey, the life in Germany, that's just not what I wanted. Like being already the year in the US, traveling, the year then completely world traveling. I just decided that while I'm so grateful for the opportunities that have emerged themselves during my time in Germany, the education that I received, but we're forever grateful, I just didn't see my life there anymore. Also, my brother, a few years earlier, moved to a different country, back to Ukraine, like moved He's spending most of the time there. And yeah, that's where I made the very, very hard decision that I want to live location independently for the next few years. I want to fully commit to creating videos, to sharing all the things that help me, from the practical stuff like the 5 a.m. morning routine, like mastering your body in terms of calories in, calories out, always staying in fairly decent shape, automizing these things, building systems around that, creating videos, building an audience, sharing with people. Also, while I was living in Germany, here in an apartment in Hamburg, I started to work people with one-on-one. I was building YouTube channels for the high school exchange company I work with together. They're doing pretty well. Their channel, a nutrition company, filmed like an image video for that. So some freelance job that was really exciting, and so that was the time there, and it was actually like the best year in terms of, let's say, my financial growth. The YouTube channel was doing pretty well, and then the freelance job. So that was kind of like the best years in terms of making some money, and that's where I also decided to really hop into be on the road and fully commit to that. I was like, 2020 is gonna be my year. I am gonna go crazy. I'm gonna put more effort than ever before. I'm gonna build structures. I'm gonna build a more solid business foundation around that. Maybe I wanna involve people, even like, let's say, build a team, hire some people. And I was already in the beginnings of that, and then victim mode. I don't want to call it like that. I really don't want to call it like that. But I'm being sometimes a little bit hard on myself. With COVID, I was like, hey, okay, travel content is not an option anymore. There was also, like, in the Q&A, met Bianca, we traveled a little bit, and then we met in Belarus. World is on full lockdown. Okay, doing a little bit of videos in Belarus, but really it caught me a little bit off guard. And also the weather there was super cold, and those kind of like, let's say, my little excuses where it really made me think a lot, made me reflect a lot. What is going to be my next move? What do I want to do? And also starting the podcast was something I wanted to do in early 2020. But that's just the way things are sometimes. That's just the way life hits sometimes. And I think 2020, I think I'm one of the least people to complain, even though some revenue streams went down. It was just, that was just a moment where I realized how good it is, the decisions that I was taking earlier, to not live like a super fancy lifestyle, but actually put money aside. So that allowed me to have a little bit more, let's say, peace of mind, because I have a good amount of savings to sustain me in times like that. Let's say like that. And that's what I also recommend for everyone to do. Like, find a way. Like, when I started to work, I was putting like $50, $100 aside, then a little bit more. And also even right now, I could live in like more expensive apartments, $30, $40, $50 a month, but I choose to stay in the places for $20 a month to still, like, right now, to not live above my means, pretty much. And we are at 52 minutes. This is pretty much my story until now. So last year traveling was crazy. I mean, you can imagine. Single guy, few months after like giving up my life in Germany, in Hamburg. My voice is really going down a little bit right now. I traveled to New York. That was an amazing time. It's a doggy dog town. Like, huge ups and downs. Overall, the New York time, once again, a month in one of the toughest cities without knowing anybody, just going there. I'm not gonna say like I arrived there after 1 week and was like, yeah, we're partying, we're knowing a lot of people. First week was fine. I was very motivated. I approached some people. I reached out to some people. Second week, I felt super lonely, even a little bit depressed. Didn't want to do much. But the third week and the fourth week, actually built some relationships, reached out to some people, filmed some videos. Overall, a great time. Came back home, gave up my apartment, turned in the key. So that's like late 2019. And left to travel the world. And there I really like stretched myself. I went to places where I necessarily didn't plan to go, like India. I was like, let me go somewhere, like solo travel somewhere, something that's gonna get me out of my comfort zone maybe a little bit. And I had a great time there. Actually, it was more comfortable than I thought it would be. and then living for 1 month in Bali, great place to network, a lot of people, like-minded people. Like in Bali, you can find everyone. You can find the spiritual gangster, the vegan community, the business people, the super hardcore like drop shippers, like money, 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 and then the yogis, they're like, we have it all. We are in full Zen mode. And I love all of them. Like I would kind of like say, I'm a little bit of a mix of like a Zen mode and like a super rational, like numbers guy. I kind of like find myself, and I like that place. I'm generally kind of like a little bit central in many understandings, as well as politically. It's kind of like just what I found for myself. I like to really pick a little bit from both sides. So to make it again a little bit about, let's say, building a personal brand, starting YouTube channels, the big vision going forward with the podcast, the goal, like the things that I want to share with you. I'm like sneakily here looking at my notes right now. I like to talk about building freedom. This is kind of like my main goal for myself. And I want to take you along on this journey and share with you. And building freedom for me means building freedom in the three big aspects of life. Like it's never going to be perfect. We're never going to arrive. And this is one of the first aspects. It's kind of like the mindset when it comes to health, relationships, and finance, career. You know, and the fourth one would maybe like be spiritual and like purpose, but I would even include it as an overarching thing. So what I mean by that is building freedom in terms of, let's say, health. What I mean is freedom to be able to know that you're in control of your body, to understand what you need to do to gain weight, to gain muscle, to lose weight, to get leaner. If you like, to me, it's crazy how many people struggle with their physical appearance. Like you might look at me and you're like, yeah, you're in shape guy. You probably were always like that. I was always a super skinny kid after I became also like super chubby as a teenager. Like we're gonna pack out the photos at some point, and like unfortunately not really blessed genetically. But I also don't want to say like, oh, I worked super hard for it. Like I have like decent average genetics. Unfortunately, I really struggle with back pain if I sit too much. Maybe at some point need to invest a little bit into a chiropractor, into a good person who knows along the ways of that. But I really mastered my body for the past 10 years in terms of making progress, building a little bit of a better physique, but also maintaining it in all situations of life. Like right now, I haven't been even going to the gym for a month because I was doing calisthenics workouts. And just knowing like what is workout volume, what is calories in, calories out, so you can maintain a healthy lifestyle. Understanding macros and micros, it's extremely important to get your vitamins, your minerals, your fiber. I'm not an expert in that. But for me, it's building a system to make it easy, to make it effortless, to put things on autopilot and to have freedom in terms of your health. So keep your health at a higher level. And for example, also me right now with my voice a little bit, I understand that I was low calorie. I was trying to get a little bit leaner and I was just not getting enough nutrients in. And that's why a lot. And also today I'm recording videos all day. Like also this is like the third hour of recording videos right now for me. Just to give you some context, but I understand what I need to do the next day to fully recover, to give myself the time, to not force myself to go into workout. So I have this freedom that I understand my body. I know what I need to do to get into better shape, to get leaner. I don't beat myself up if I gain maybe a little bit of weight. So this is what I really, this is kind of like an area that I'm pretty happy with. I still at some point want to get to a much, much better level. I think it's just exciting to grow. Maybe at some point, maybe get a coach and let him coach me up to a level where I'm going to be like in really, really crazy physical condition. I want to do that at some point. Like my friend Komang Nava, which is going to be in the next podcast. He is a pro natural bodybuilder, and he offered me maybe to like join a competition at some point with his help. We'll see about that, you know. And the other area of freedom is relationships. Like I found relationships to be extremely fascinating. And I'm a young guy. By no means I want to say like, oh, I have things figured out. But kind of like on the one side, the surface of just being able to meet people, to have this freedom to be able to go into a city, into a new country and know that you will never be alone. There's always amazing people around you and have the skills and the tools to be able to approach them and to make them your friends. And on a deeper level, understanding kind of like the psychology behind our needs. Like all of us as humans, we need approval, we need to be appreciated, we need to be understood. But what can we do to give that to other people? How can we heal our own, let's say, wounds in terms of maybe childhood trauma? And what I mean by that is many of us, we have struggles with relationships, both friendships as intimate relationships, because things in our past happened that now we are addicted to certain emotions. We just see ourselves in a certain light that doesn't allow us to have this amazing partner, this amazing girl, for example, that you maybe want to date, or to feel like you don't deserve. Maybe because when you were younger, your parents told you that you have to get a certain like good grades in order for you. Basically what they communicated to you, unfortunately, is that you are not worthy unless you're going to have good grades. And those are, for example, often then the guys who feel like they have to really qualify themselves when they meet new people. Like they meet a new girl, like, hey, look at me, I'm successful, I have money, I have resources. And like, if you're going to talk to anyone who's, I don't know, who feels like he is at a good place when it comes to like meeting girls as a guy, he's going to tell you that it's not really important, it doesn't matter. Like most girls that I met in all of my life, it's about the energy. It's about what you can provide. And whatever that means, definitely food for another podcast episode is something that I talk a lot about already on my second channel. So building freedom in terms of that, building freedom from your needs, your emotional needs of feeling this lack, of feeling like you need a person in your life or otherwise you will never be happy. This like false idea that something can complete us. It's a very big topic and it's controversial. And like, I'm not saying like my opinion is the right opinion. I want to share. And I want to share the things that help me and also introduce ideas. I'm in a constant state of like, I have a certain belief system and I believe in that fiercely. And sometimes I have even like troubles when I talk to people, they believe like I want to convince them of my opinion, which actually is, I try to see myself in a constant like state of developing my ideas and changing them actually. So I try to not identify with my beliefs. My beliefs are things that I learned from the past that now I have, that now work for me, but maybe later on I will change them from new information, new input, new numbers, new feelings, new experiences. So that's kind of like also a bigger concept, things that I want to talk about, like how to not identify with your beliefs and your worldviews. They are your beliefs and your worldviews. They are not who you are. Okay, I'm now starting to get a little bit more intense here, a little bit more riled up. I like that. And the third thing is finance, very practical, like creating, let's say, an online audience like me with YouTube, with the multiple channels, with the people that I helped to start their channels, something that I want to go more into, work with people one-on-one. And it's also something, but like all of these three aspects is something that on lower level, like let's say, I know that not everybody can like afford a high ticket coaching that I'm also offering, but with my Patreon, I want to build an inner circle of ambitious people. If the things that I was telling in this podcast so far, if you can relate, if you think like, hey, this is the type of life I want to live, I want to be able to maybe travel the world for some time, to meet people everywhere, to get my habits in order, to have discipline, to have freedom. I want to build an inner circle of people who share similar values, similar aspirations, and have weekly check-ins. Like one of the biggest things that I notice with myself and with other people is like, we know what to do. All the information is out there, but we struggle with the accountability. There's no one in the back pushing us a little bit and also counting on us in a way. We as human beings, we operate kind of like on this accountability principle that if we know we like promised somebody or made an investment in whatever form, that then we are much more likely to execute. So this is the inner circle that I'm building on Patreon, is one of the tiers that I'm offering. So if you have any questions about that, if you want to join that, you're very welcome. The guys that are already in a similar agreement in that, I'm absolutely loving it. And going forward, I want to also, let's say, host events, potentially maybe in Bali or in the Philippines. Like imagine this one video that I shared from the Philippines where I'm on a boat, we're going on secluded islands. At some point, I want to take out a group of like 10 ambitious, motivated, amazing people who want to build a great life together with me, and do a little bit of a boot camp, kind of like on the one side as a travel agency, give this travel experience of like where companies already charge hundreds and sometimes, in my opinion, way too much for what they actually provide. Like a lot of like people who travel for the first time from like the West, from Germany, from the US, they pay like thousands to a company that just basically buys them a plane ticket and gives them like an insurance and a SIM card when they arrive in the country and then put them on a tour. What I actually want to do is I want to do a deep immersion on the one side and travel every day, go out maybe to waterfalls if we're on the secluded islands. Like this is maybe something what 2021, 2022, hopefully. But then also like do 3 blocks. On the one side, the block of health. We're going to talk about that. On the other side, the block of relationship, talk about it. And then also personal branding, creating videos. So do maybe like a 1 week or 2 week in-depth workshop. This is kind of like a little bit of a dream, but even more of a goal, a plan of mine for the next year or 2. So joining my inner circle is kind of like already setting you up to be part potentially of that. And I'm super pumped. And speaking again, financially, also the topics of just me sharing information, freedom, because you're free. You don't need all the time to buy all the cool things because you derive this sense of approval from somewhere else. Like this, like if you buy the new iPhone, if you buy this new cool thing, the clothing, there's nothing wrong with that. It's always about the intention. Is like, why do you get these things? Why do you have the feeling that you need these things in order to feel a certain way? So I want to dive deep into that. And kind of like this book that I'm reading right now, for example, Influence, the Psychology of Persuasion. It is talking about why we often buy things and we have the feeling that we need the things because of clever marketing strategies. And I love marketing. But I think if it's used in a good way, if it is used to sell people on things they actually want, actually need, they actually will get them ahead. And this is kind of like the products that I hope to be able to provide in the future. Generally, I don't like to talk like too specific about goals because very often if we do, I make the personal experience that you kind of feel like you almost achieved it at a certain point and you don't feel like now like executing. Check it out in the description below. And we chatted right now for over an hour. I had a blast. It turned out much, much better. Am I self-complimenting right now? Narcissist. But I really was afraid that I'm not going to be able to package my message, my story, the things that I wanted to talk about. And this is kind of like a kickoff for hopefully months and years with the Got a World to See podcast. So all the guests that I'm going to be having on, we're all going to also talk about these 3 pillars of building freedom in these areas. So whenever somebody is a little bit or a lot of an expert in an area, that's where I want to interview these people, but even more, just hear genuine stories. Like there's many great podcasts that I'm listening to, and now it's going to be up to me to maybe make it better or make it in my own way. But with many self-development concepts, it's just about people just talk about the concepts, talk about the ideas. But I would love to hear personal stories of people, of their child stories, from their grandparents, their parents, actual real stuff that people can relate to. Like, okay, and so let's wrap up the first podcast episode. If you're watching the video right now, you maybe see that I have different jeans on, and that's the reason I'm filming it a few days later. Don't want to say that I really messed up on the recording, maybe lost the ending. No, that's not what happened, of course not. But also, had some time to think a little bit about it. Really personal video, maybe even a little bit more vulnerable that I feel comfortable to. But again, to mention, this is the type of content that over the years I got the most of. I wanted to do for a long time, and it's really a passion project. It's my baby. It's not something that's going to make me a lot of money in the near future, but it's something that I really want to do. And I hope you enjoyed today's first little episode, got something out of it. If you did, you're welcome to post me in your Instagram story, kind of in a way of like if you liked it, if you would recommend it to a friend. And what I also will be doing is I will be reposting everybody who mentions me kind of like as a shout out, also to create a little bit of a community. So if you did, you're welcome to do that. And of course, as mentioned before, kicking off the Patreon project, the Patreon family, the inner community. If you just want to support the project, you can start it off with the price of a coffee at $4. And with that, you get an exclusive right to get your answer questioned every single month, either in person or on the monthly podcast episode. And next to that, you also have the opportunity to join my inner circle, to get in touch with me one-on-one, and something that I don't see many people doing, but I believe is the best way to really create a human-to-human connection, and me also potentially help you with some of the questions that you might have around the 3 areas of building freedom as I laid them down in this first podcast episode. So with that, the next one actually will be An interview, the first interview with Komang Arnawa, 2 times former world champion in natural bodybuilding, and a really cool guy. We had a cool conversation back in Bali about his first beginnings in bodybuilding, about how at some point his parents were talking to each other. They cannot afford to buy him any more food, eggs, because it just costed too much. And how he overcame all of that, how he got to where he is today. A really interesting conversation, so make sure to tune in for that as well. And as always, you too got a world to see. Until next time. And so, I hope you enjoyed the first Got a World to See podcast episode. As always, you find all the information in the description box below. And at this point, you also should be able to listen to the podcast not only with video here on YouTube, but also Spotify and all the other platforms. This project right now, it is really a passion project. It's not something that I do for the money. It's something actually that takes up a lot of time as of right now. But I feel like it's the right thing to do, and I think it will pay off in the coming years. Gonna see each other very soon. To the first Got a World to See podcast episode. For a second, I forgot the name of the podcast. One more time. I'm like, to the first. What the fuck was it? Listen to the episode on Spotify. We'll see if I get it on all the other platforms shortly as well. Definitely at some point they will be there. Where you, as the listener, but also me, in a few months and years, can go back to get an idea of who I am, of what I do. How is it? Is it any good? What's up, man? How you doing? What's your name? I'm Dany. How you doing? Hi.
Hello.
You're from here?
I'm from Kosovo.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
I live here.
Nice.
For 5 years. Curious to see you.
Yeah, if you want to reach out, you can let me know what you do.
Great.
All right. Have a good one.
Bye. Bye. Ciao.
Bye.
So we're gonna see each other or hear each other very soon, be it on the YouTube, be it on Instagram, or here on the podcast, or maybe even on Patreon. So see you over there. Bye bye. You too. Got a world to see. That was epic, huh? That was fucking epic.